Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And today we're doing it. We're doing it. We've been asked to do it a number of times, and now we're just going to dive in, because we've been really interested, and I've been very interested in this one. Just in Conquest lore in general, and devouring it. And people have asked for us to cover that on the channel, and we're just gonna. And we're going to start with a faction that I deeply, deeply enjoy and have fallen down the rabbit hole of. And shockingly, John has also, but only by osmosis.
Yeah, like this faction's lore is phenomenal. I probably won't play it, but the lore is just, it's deep. It digs deep, as you would say.
Much like them. Today we're going to be talking about the Dweghom. And you might be going, do you mean dwarf? And no, I do not. And we're going to talk about their fluff. We're going to avoid very many mechanics. We'll touch on them lightly at the end, bringing it home on sort of like how all of this translates to the tabletop. But largely we are going to stick to the realm of lore, so that if you are just getting into Conquest and you are someone who cares about lore for your army, for your faction, for what you play, very much like I am, this is a place where hopefully I can get you up to speed comprehensively of the broad scale of the faction, and also maybe set the stage for you to start writing some of your own stories if you want to make your own heroes and, custom miniatures, stuff like that. Because for some people, lore doesn't matter at all for their minis. For me, matters a lot. And seems for our viewers too. But John, if we're going to talk about Dweghom, I think we have to go back. Like, I think the only way is to go back.
We got to go back, Marty.
We got to go back. Well, we're not going back to the future. We're going back to the back. We're back to the past. We're further back.
Back to back.
Back to backening. The Dweghom, if we're going to talk about them, you have to go back in the lore. Truly, this faction in the modern setting of Ea, to understand them, you have to understand where they come from. Because where they come from and their origin story influences everything they do today. Their whole society, everything they are, and their abilities. Because as you look at them, probably look at them and go, wow, these aren't just like normal Tolkien-esque dwarves. Like, you look at the Hold Warriors and you're like, okay, we're kind of there, but there's a little edge to them. But then you get to like the Flaming Automata, the Flame Berserkers, the big Hellbringer Drakes, the guys who are literally on fire and throwing spells. Like, this is off. Something has happened, and the history is what sets the tone for that. And that's because primarily, before they were Dweghom, they were dwarves. Long ago.
Well, originally their official name was the Crafters, and then they were called the Dwarves by the dragon as a sort of like diminutive derogatory term, as being lesser than the dragon.
Yes. Yeah, you have to think of dragons here to decide the level set, not like a D&D dragon of like just a big reptile with some abilities. Dragons here are cosmic entities. If you're familiar with League of Legends, think like Aurelion Sol, or if you play Magic the Gathering, who's the dragon villain?
Nicol
Bolas, thank you. Like that. They are magically infused beings who are ancient entities.
Or if you want like a D&D stand-in, Tiamat is another good example.
Yeah. Like, they're on another level. They're not gods, because gods come later. But they are before the gods existed. They are of the cosmos. And that gives them a lot of power. But they didn't want to spend their days running their empires doing the little piddly stuff. You're too powerful for that. You don't want to be doing the logistics. You don't want to be doing the custodial stuff. You don't want to be doing any of the crafting. You don't want to be building structures. You don't want to be mining. You want to go do whatever cosmic entities do. And they decided that they were just going to make their own servants. So they flesh crafted a whole race. The dwarves.
Yep.
And the key to this is they gave them a feature to make them more useful.
Yeah, so part of the before we get into the feature that they get is that they learned this flesh crafting from the Spires, who are another race we'll talk about later. But they didn't learn it from them like a teaching. They learned it from observing it and seeing it being used. So they don't fully understand the ramifications of the thing that they're doing. It's very hubris-esque. And so when they go to create this new race that is going to be subservient to them, they give them this ability of like generational memory that they believe will just make them very, very good servants, right? Like everything they learn, they'll pass down, and those things that gets passed down from generation to generation will make each individual generation better than the last and improve. But what they don't realize is that also means that everything they do to this race will be remembered. Every slight, every act of cruelty, every act of aggression. So it doesn't matter if you as a dragon are kind for 2 generations. They remember that first generation that got absolutely cruelly dealt with.
Yeah.
Imagine if in our history, in real life, like a good example, World War II, if you could remember vividly everything that your great-great-grandfather dealt with in World War II.
Yeah, you touched a rune and then you absorbed the memories of his experience in a particularly hellacious battle. That would flavor how you view the world, because you would understand. You would have downloaded almost like a first-person perspective of the experience for him. That would be hard to forget.
Yeah, and it completely changes an entire species. Like the entire species is warped by this forever. Like this is the first inkling and seed that makes them not gonna be these perfect automaton servants that the dragons want.
Yeah, and as you would imagine, they were made largely to not question the dragons, and to do what they said, and to just be like good little worker bees, essentially, in the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them had just, maybe it's from these memories, maybe it's because of the inherent friction that you're going to get when you make something that has its own sentience and willpower. Maybe it's both. But some of the dwarves didn't unquestioningly follow orders. They didn't necessarily start rebellions or anything, but they were little friction points in the system. And the way the dragons dealt with that is by sending these dwarves underground. They would send you to the mines as like a punishment for your transgression.
Like it's the worst laboring you can do. Is you're going to go to the mines.
It's going to be
and you're going to
incredibly hot. You're going to spend your whole rest of your life underground in the darkness, away from the sun, away from the surface, away from the comforts of the society that you built, and you are going to work until you die in the dark. And these dwarves put underground did their job. They dug because they didn't have an option. How do you go to war? Like, how do you try to fight or go to war or do a rebellion against an entity that is cosmically powerful when all you have is like a pickaxe and a dinner knife? Like, it's not.
And lucky if you have the dinner knife.
Yeah, it's not winnable. It's just not. So they survived. They dug, and they dug, and they dug, and they mined ever deeper to fulfill the draconic overlord's needs, which were ever growing. But there's a problem for the dragons. Eventually, as the picks were hitting stone, they crumble away a piece, hit it, crumble away a piece, hit it, crumble away a piece, swing, and the sound was different. Underneath the stone in the deepest tunnels they had ever dug, they hit metal. Finished metal. Not ore. Metal. Of a type they didn't know. And they started to try to excavate around it. And what they found is, they didn't know it at the time, but a prison. A vault. Hidden deep, deep, deep beneath the surface of Aya, or the world in Conquest. And once they found this, as we know it to be a prison, a vault, if you will, they found gates that barred it closed. And they broke them. Because again, if there's something valuable under here, you should get it for your overlords. But also, you're just sort of curious. But yeah, totally for the overlords. And inside, they found a primordial entity. A colossal primordial entity. Not a god, older than a god. I mean, we're talking a manifestation of an idea. In real space. Capital W, war. They found war.
The entity war that like all of war feeds from.
Like a horseman of the apocalypse being. And unbeknownst to them, the dragons had a colossal conflict with this entity, as you would imagine, at one point. And they managed to overcome it, and you can't really kill an entity like that, but you can bind it beneath the world. So mortal hands can never find it again. Unfortunately, though, through fate or luck or manipulation, who knows? The dwarves dug deep enough and found the vault. And as they looked at this entity, they were offered a gift of sorts from.
You could say it's a gift. It's more like a deal. More like a deal.
That is hotly debated in Dweghom culture. They would call it a gift for the most part. An offer of power from this entity to break their own chains, if they so wished. And essentially, the gift that war offered them is that they ended up getting strength, they ended up getting durability, they got an unwavering endurance, an abundance of willpower also to resist the sway of the dragons themselves. And also, it even gave them the gift of elemental magic. Not necessarily from war, but from this incredible... They would describe it as like a throne, but like this seat that he was bound to, made of swirling energies of heat and metal and earth sort of fluxing around each other to bind this thing down. They imbibed a piece of that, letting them now use magic. Incredible destructive magic. And it turned some of them into sorcerers. And as you can imagine, when you give a group of dwarves who are being punished by the dragons the choice of power to break your chains, they're going to take it. They're going to take it. And that hatred combined with those abilities makes for an incredible fighting force.
Yeah, like it takes them from like just normal laborers to sort of these massive forces of nature, and just it completely 180s them, right? Like it makes each of these dwarves almost like Doom guy from like Doom. Like they just can break things incredibly well. Like the fighting capability is tenfold.
And they're really fueled up on this like subservience, because again, they have the memories of the former generations that have been passed down to them. Like their conviction is ironclad. And now they've got gifts that they can spread to other dwarves. And these dwarves who choose to rebel against the dragons, who accept this gift from war, become known as the Dweghom.
And the ones who refuse it and want to still stay with the dragons for whatever reason are still known as the dwarves. And it's important to know there are still some dwarves, I think there's like 3, kicking around in modern Conquest. So like, despite the fact that this conflict goes on for centuries, it was not like an immediate, oh, well, some of us are breaking our chains, all of us are going to break our chains. Like, no, there's a civil war on top of fighting the dragons, on top of like trying to come to terms with effectively their new master, war.
Yeah, they took their gift and they sort of like surged to the surface, and they started to spread these powers to war. And they offered they didn't just like outright kill the other dwarves because they could see that they were being manipulated. So they would offer them the ability to join them. And those that took it, great, you get the powers, you're in. But if you refused, you were put to the sword and fought like an enemy combatant, and they started to kill dragons. And it was incredibly bloody, just staggeringly so. And centuries of violence later, the dragons lost. This sort of communal power of war and ancestral memories, which also over generations could pass martial knowledge down, made for a really hard snowball to stop.
Yeah, because like once you have one generation that learns how to kill a dragon, they can then pass that knowledge down when they die to the next generation to learn how to better kill a dragon, and then better, and then better, and then better.
And that was just too much. They killed every dragon they could find. They routed their holds. They put the dwarves down. They took on Dweghom, and they were victorious. And they started to settle. Every now and then, you will still hear rumors of dragons existing around somewhere, and they will run them down. But largely, the dragons are gone from the setting. Murdered by the Dweghom.
Yeah, there's a handful left. They're still kicking around, and like they're pushing some pieces around, but most of them are just gone.
They're doing stuff in the shadows, because they know if they show themselves at any point, this is an like ancestral feud that is on site. If a dragon is rumored around, the Dweghom are coming. And in force, which now, as you can imagine, all hopped up on Mountain Dew, and in warfare, they're a pretty fictitious group. But the threat of a dragon appearing again is the one thing that would unite them. So you just have to lay low until you can, make your magnum opus plan come to work for the dragons. But that brings us to Dweghom in the modern setting of Ea, the place where like you're playing now. Where those gifts have been manifested for generations.
Yeah, and to start off with, like, I think an important thing to know about the Dweghom place in Ea is that they are mostly isolationist. Like, they mostly do not take part in conflicts above ground. They very rarely are in taking part up there. Now, in something called the Living World, some of that has been changing, but like the vast majority of their history is internal underneath the surface. They do not spend most of the time pre the beginning of the setting sort of like fist fighting humans or fist fighting Wadroon or like fist fighting Old Dominion. Like, no, they're chilling and fist fighting each other. Like
a lot of the time. Yeah, I mean, they ended up taking, like, obviously they'd been very comfortable with underground holds and stuff. They ended up taking them for themselves. And they sort of banded together to make their own societies from these places that they conquered. And then they dug down and started to make laws and cultures. And that's where you get these ideas of holds. You could think of them like countries or nations. But for the Dweghom, a hold is sort of like an underground system where a society lives. And there's multiple of these. And each one is unique. It has its own leader and its own beliefs, which lead to its own, individualized tenets, which you could play with if you're making your own story. But the core of all Dweghom society is exactly the same. And that it can be summed up simply as work is for automata, wealth means nothing, and the only thing worth pursuing is Aghm. And Aghm is the thing we have to hit on, because it is the entirety of what their society and life revolves around.
Yeah, in like the modern Dweghom society, in the absence of the purpose of killing the dragons, they needed something to like keep them contained, right? Like they are filled with this immeasurable power. They are filled with this ability for like constant violence. They are filled with the desire for that violence. They build a system called Aghm around it, which is like your worth to society, which is the contribution of your deeds solidified in the memories around you, to create like this like living legend style form of currency, where like all of the cool stuff you did is what gives you your ability to do anything in society. Not your money, not your like family, not your position. Your position is determined by your Aghm, and like not even gender roles. Like gender roles don't exist in the society. It's entirely what did you do.
It's true. Like the Aghm is the thing that we wake up for every day. Like money doesn't exist here because why do we need money? The automata do all the work. We don't need to buy stuff. And, you know, swords and like basic swords and armor are like pressed out all day by automata because we don't do that work anymore. We're not dwarves. So you don't need to get money to buy stuff. It's given to you if you are worth giving it to. You know, if you are like 2 years old in war school learning how to do combat and you are worth handing weapons and armor so you can fight for the clan, they're going to hand them to you. And the Aghm, the memories of how well you have done, which are solidified by, they are literally like, think of them like sorcerers of memory called the Memancers. The Memancers? I think it's Memancers. I'm going to go with that. It's double Memancers. I'm going to go with Memancers. The Memancers can solidify memories from people. So when big stuff happens, your deeds are remembered. You can measure it quantifiably, how cool you are. And that is what gets you everything. If you perform well in battle, you kill for the clan, you strive to respond to any slight against the hold, you try to take more land, you try to get more kills, you try to challenge enemy heroes, you try to get big moments. After the fight, it will be solidified. And then everyone knows, hey, he's worth something.
Yeah.
And like this Aghm is what gets you everything in Dweghom society. I mean, it gets you gear because if you are worth giving the better stuff, they're going to give you the better stuff. Why wouldn't they? Because you're going to use it well. It gets you soldiers to command, like the people who aren't of Aghm as much as you are, who are lesser value. Why wouldn't we give you command of them? You've shown you are better than them. You can command them and make them get more.
And those soldiers are very loyal to the people with a higher Aghm than them because they believe that by following someone with higher Aghm, they themselves can attain more Aghm and maybe get to that as well.
And you can check their bona fides. Like, what gives you the right to lead me? Oh, damn, you did that? Okay. Like, so be it. Also, it gives you the right to, like, have a spouse and have children. Which aren't necessarily for, like, fulfillment of, I want to, like, fall in love and write poetry. But it lets you create young to add soldiers to the hold. It all ties back to war. And then it also gives you rank. If you're good enough, not only are you going to get one unit of people to command, you're going to start getting multiple. And if you do really well with a few, they're going to give you a dozen. If you do really well with a dozen, they're going to give you dozens. And if you're incredible, you can end up commanding an army.
Yeah, and you can imagine, as we're explaining this, it was essentially a society built around preparing themselves for constant, never-ending conflict. And they don't have a constant, never-ending conflict.
That's a problem. Especially when the only way you could get Aghm is in conflict.
So what this leads to is just a lot of like bickering and fighting internally within the race. Like there's just a lot of internal fighting. Not just like a little bit of like scuff and skirmishes, like whole ass fucking wars. Like full on conflicts in the underground.
Because again, any slight argues your Aghm isn't valid. Like, if I say, like, if John has quite a bit of Aghm, and I am from an opposing clan, and I say, like, I think your memory is invalid. I think your Aghm isn't as good as you think it is. Oh, damn. Like, the implication is that your clan's memory is wrong. And your whole clan, all of your actions are worthless. Because you don't remember right. And
Yeah.
then you have to respond for this whole charade to keep held. And that becomes war very quickly.
Yeah, and as with any conflict, eventually over time, really you start seeing some forces solidify. Like you have individual clans who solidify as their own, and like clans are their own separate thing from these two sides that we're going to talk about, which are the tempered and the ardent, which are sort of these philosophies around the gifts that war have given. And sort of like how they look at the world through these two lenses. One is inherently more fanatic, while the other one is inherently less fanatic, but is unstable. So, like, Joe, you need to tell me about the Ardent, because I know you really, really like the Ardent.
Okay, for the record, like, in terms of which faction I back, it's the Tempered every time, okay? It's definitely the Tempered, like, for sure. Personally, I'm backing the Tempered. But I think in terms of what is sicker, it's the Ardent. Like, it's so nutty. God, absolute nightmare people. Okay, so when the original Dweghom walked into the primordial hold of war, the two societies here essentially view that one event with different levels of importance and focus. So, for the Ardent, they look back and really honor and glorify the decisions of those who looked at the primordial entity themselves, saw the power it could give them, the strength and the ability to shatter these chains, and harnessed it wholeheartedly, and then did so. Who broke the chains, who obtained freedom for the dwarves to allow them to become Dweghom. And they glorify this choice, the embrace of war as a way of life. That war is always, that life is violent at any time, and you might as well be prepared. Why fight it? And for them, they look at this as a tool to ensure that they will never again be bound in servitude. Never.
Yes.
No cost. At whatever cost it takes, never again. And the Ardent build their whole society around it because their little sect want to be ready and further their training and their devotion to war to make sure that if a bigger threat comes to enslave them again, that they will be there on the front lines to kick it in the teeth.
Yeah, like it is immediately like Hall or Brawl, the faction.
Yeah,
like sub-faction.
And they prepare their initiates for warfare's sake. They are zealots. So they are incredibly well trained, martially speaking. They're incredibly well drilled. They're indoctrinated with the idea that, like, the memories at Aghm means much less. Like, really, your ability to do war is what matters the most. The general rabble of the holds, they don't understand. You understand. You need to look at things further. You need to have a higher purpose. And they do all of that both pragmatically to, like, be ready to defend the holds, but also because they have to prep them for what is their pilgrimage, their absolute show of devotion. And that's what they call the decoro. I think I'm saying that right. Decoro? Yeah. The descent. Inside the holds where the dwarves live, the old tunnels still exist. The old mines still exist. They never, like, went through and closed them up.
I mean, why would you?
Yeah, like,
that's a waste of effort when you've got fighting to do. We got Aghm to get. You ain't getting Aghm by moving rocks.
Absolutely not. They're gonna make fun of you for that. And so that means that deep, deep, deep down in the dark, you can get close to war again. You can go on the same walk that your ancestors did. The problem is, down there's no light, there's no sound, and there are creatures that lurk in the dark. Horrifying creatures that have been warped by the energies that they are near, that now just run rampant and murder anything that lives there in this uber violent nightmare realm. And for the Ardent, their pilgrimage, not to like worship war as a god, but to honor the Dweghom who first made the choice to accept his gift. Because they don't worship war, capital W, like you would imagine, like in our modern day faiths you often would.
Mm-hmm.
Where they like do prayers and stuff. No. It's more symbolic and in memory of the memories that you've accepted. And then they send their recruits down. And the deeper you go, the higher chance you'll die. But also, the closer you get to war. The closer you get to war, the more powers you might obtain. And then, if you come up alive, you've passed. You are now the turboest, killiest Giga Chad this side of the realm.
Yeah, you are now the guy. Like, you are the main character.
You're pretty sick. Well, you're not quite the main character. You're in the main cast. You're certainly high up there. The main character is what they call an Ardent Kirawa. It's the highest thing they can aspire to in the Ardent. An Ardent Kirawa is a person who not just went down to deep depths and came up alive. They're a person who went as far as can possibly go and has like heard all warfare all across the planet in their skull at all times for however many years it took them to do this walk in pitch blackness, and got to the absolute doorstep of war, the door of war, the gate of hell, for like metaphor's sake, touched it, and then didn't go insane. And they, instead of falling to this insanity, like everything down there does, turned around and said, they need me up top, and walked out. And then survived the walk back. That's the hardest dude. That's the main character of their anime. Okay.
That's the Super Chief.
Yeah, that is absolutely the Super Trooper. That's Doom Guy. He's got purple hair. He's main character.
That's the Master Chief. We have found the Master Chief.
And he gets literal magic about it. Like, he becomes a priest. When you touch that door and, like, walk away from it, you become a priest. You can take those memories of all warfare all across Aya at all times and, like, push them into your enemy's mind to ruin them or embolden your own soldiers. And that's the gift you get. That's the Ardent. That is one half warring for the heart of Dweghom society. But the other, philosophically, is the Tempered. John, who are the Tempered?
So, the Tempered. The Tempered are a hard one to discuss, because whereas the Ardent sort of like see the entity of war and go, this is this is a tool for me to never be bound again. Right? This is my path to freedom. The Tempered saw the machinery around war and the elemental areas around it and went, oh, there's something bigger here. Like, there is more to this than just this part we're seeing. And that has led to them having like these massive powers of like harnessing the powers of earth and fire, and sometimes they can mix them in this thing called steel, which we will talk about in here in a little bit. But it leaves them unstable. It's like they're these vessels for this immeasurable power that builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up. And if they don't have enough willpower to harness it and to use it, and then also have opportunities to use it, they will explode, and it will come out. They won't, not like physical explosion, but they will like, it will come out of them regardless with a lack of control. This has led to them like trying to build this cult or this society of tempering oneself and finding ways of taking this out, like putting an outlet out for it, finding a way to use it productively for the greater Dweghom society, and to not just cause havoc amongst everything. And their big thing is sorcerers. So if you're a big guy, not the biggest guy, but if you're a big guy, you are a sorcerer with the Tempered. You have the gift of being able to harness like earth or fire. You have willpower to be able to choose when you harness the gift of earth or fire. On top of that, you have the ability to harness it in new and interesting ways. The step above that is steel shapers, which are... It's really hard to explain in an easy manner, but they are just the most willpower, the most like super caster guy. Like they can handle everything to a degree that is unimaginable to the sorcerers below them.
Yeah, it's sort of like a lot of people approach this from the mindset of like, oh, well, like if I have enough earth force, I could like force metal into shape. And you're like, yeah, sure, you could. You could. Or like if you have enough fire, I could heat it up and then force metal into shape. And like, yeah, you could. You could. Mm-hmm. But while you're doing that, if I'm a steel shaper, I have closed my eyes in thought of a beautiful, incredible, intricate design, including like circuit board-esque delicacy and placement. All that will fuse together in harmony to be able to allow magic to flow through it. And I closed my eyes, thought of it, and it just existed. Why am I hammering anything together? Like you don't even see the step beyond. They just make metals exist the way they want.
It's like trying to explain quantum computing to a 14th century blacksmith.
It's just you're on another level. You're seeing the world fundamentally differently when you are just imagining things into existence. And for the Tempered, that's their highest aspiration. Because once you become a steel shaper, you are no longer unstable. You are balanced.
Mm-hmm. You are tempered. Like you are this tempered steel.
You are no longer a danger to yourself or the clan. Your powers are no longer frothing out of you. You've mastered them. And this, for the Tempered, is the hope that they can maybe better Dwarven society. That if we can get a few people like this, could we do it to more?
Because the big thing with the Tempered is that they recognize the situation they're in. That like the Dweghom society is full of a desire and need for conflict, and it is eating them alive internally. And the Steel Shapers can see that and go, we gotta do something about it. Like we got dwarves over here shooting fireballs out of their fingertips, just random people. We got other ones that won't stop fist fighting each other. And then we got these crazy lunatics over across the mountains that are over here going, we're gonna touch this like hell door. We're gonna touch the hell door. Everybody, our entire society is built around touching the hell door. Like, what? Why? Why? What does it give you? It gives me the ability to kill stuff better. Why? What do we have to kill? We killed all the dragons. What do we kill now? I don't know. We'll find more stuff to kill. There's nothing to kill right now.
Some of the dragons might come back. Well, I mean, I guess you're kind of fucking right, but like, there's a better way.
But like, I can make computer like automaton things, man. Like, we don't have to work anymore. What are you talking about? No, I have to fist fight everything. Which I think it comes to the point in our little script we have written that I'm going to give a little hint to the viewers. Joe just wrote the line, why can't they stop murdering shit? Jeebus Christ. And that's where we're at with the Modern of the Faction. Is like they have this a fundamentally cool and like well-grounded faction with lots of lore and like reasons for being, as fucked up as they are, and like almost like a symbolic reference of like trauma. Right? And they can't get over it. Like, they have to fist fight everything.
Yeah, I will say, like, there's buddy, I ain't gonna get too deep on this here episode, but, like, I look at this from the outside, I'm like, man, they just do a war all the time? Why would you do that? And then I read their backstory, and there's some resonance with some of my own. And I'm like, oh, I see it. Actually, I get it now. Like, I can see the connections of where some of these people, especially if you can inherit memories, can't let it go. Mm-hmm. You can't. I understand what that's like on an individual level. I can extrapolate what that might do on a societal level, and it's going to make you unreasonably angry and violent. And
especially when you're given the power from the deity, capital W, war, to do stuff, which is much more subtle, and his chains are not like, oh, you're in our servitude, you're going to do all the tasks that we told you to do. Instead, he wants you to do they want you to do violence in their name. Like,
because they just want violence. Any war is good for war. It doesn't, like, and your society is so well built around committing war. Why would you need to step in and get your hands dirty? It's already working great.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it up. It's just, there are other chains around them, and some of them cannot see it. However, some of them are questioning. Not just the tempered. Some of the people in the hold are questioning this idea of Aghm. They're questioning the idea of eternal conflict. They're a faction that is like drenched in a lot of history that sets the baseline expectations of their beliefs, but it is not one note by any means. The tempered and the ardent are like essentially battling each other for the soul of the Dweghom, and we don't know who's going to win. We're going to find out over time. The hold is sort of caught in the middle. Some of them are really like holding fast to the Aghm structure. Some of them are trying to push against it. We don't know which are going to win. We'll find out over time. But what I think it does give you is like this beautiful faction that if it stays as it is like doomed to tear themselves apart one way or the other, and is primed for some change. And that makes a foundation that we can use in tabletop to like make our own cool heroes, your own holds, your own clans, your own hero, your own leaders. And you can use that to start writing your own fluff for your own minis if you want to. If you want to have a general that is your custom general that's an Ardent, why? Why are they that way? What are they afraid of? What memory have they inherited that makes them want to be prepared? Do they have some little tremor that a dragon is out there? Do they know a threat is coming? Are they afraid of sharing this for what it would do to their fellows? There's compelling options there. If you make a tempered general, what nightmares have they maybe witnessed less skilled gifted go through? Have they watched them die? Literally explode. These young, like, children, just boom, gone. Because no one was there to guide them. What are they willing to do to make a structure to guide the next generation? That's a great story. You could run with it.
There's so much built here to make cool stories on the Dweghom. It's not one note of like, oh yeah, war. Like there's so much more to it. It has layers and layers, like an onion or like a mine.
Yes, much like a mine that leads all the way down into the dark realms of war. Who is also free, by the way, walking the worlds again.
Yep.
Because they weakened his bindings by using the elemental power from the throne, and now he is out of there.
Doing whatever he wants.
I'm sure that's not going to have consequences.
Turns out we're playing a war game. I wonder what war's going to do in it.
I don't know. Hard to say. But all of that to say, I think the Dweghom are sick. Like, Dweghom Lore...
They are. They're cool.
I'm going to be honest. Like, I play Nords. That's the faction I got into. I want Dweghom to be my second faction. But Dweghom is the faction that actually convinced me to try Conquest in general. Because I like dwarves just as like a concept in fantasy. And this was arguably like the most original interpretation I've seen of what I thought would end up being like Tolkien-esque dwarves. And it was so cool. I wanted to learn more about the world and then got into the game.
Yeah.
And I hope y'all find it equally cool. And if you want more about Dweghom, you have questions, post them below. We'd be happy to address them. We love getting more topic ideas for lore. And after how much fun we've had writing this episode for Dweghom, we'd like to do more. Also, minor shout out, there is a short story for Dweghom free on the website. I highly recommend, called The Ardent. We'll link it below. It is from Parabellum. They wrote it. It is very, very good. And if you want to see the intricacies from a first-person perspective of this society, please go give it a read.
Yes.
For now, that's been all of our opinions, bona fide, and Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all on the next one.